Hello friends, ever wondered why there's a difference between ILS X-ray, Yankee, Zulu? Wondered what that difference is? Or better yet, how do you know which one you're supposed to use? I was giving a tutorial recently to a friend and he has the same question, like different airports sometimes have these letters, not all of them do. We'll take a look at that. So how do you know which one? That's what we're going to look at today. So let's come on into Navigraph, where I've selected 3 different airports so that we can take a look at. The first one here, Italy, Ancona, Italy. It's on the northern side of the boot, or the northeastern side. And what we see is the approach here that takes us in this case, runway 22, ILS. Let's first of all now discuss what's the same, okay? So all of these are for runway 22. They're all going to take you down to this point here, the same physical piece of concrete. They're all got the same final approach heading, 221 degrees. They've all got the same ILS frequency, 111.90 or 111.9, said another way. They've all got the same identifier, India Fox Alpha. Got the Morse code there. And so if all of these things are the same, what's different? And that difference, whatever that difference is what makes one an ILS Zulu, what makes another one an ILS Yankee or an ILS X-ray. In this case, and this is a really obvious difference in this specific example, but as we'll see in a moment, they're not always as obvious. So here's ILS Zulu. Taking a look at that, the runway is obviously here, just inside the coastline. Where does the whole procedure begin? And he'll quite rightly point out, well, it's Ladov. Ladov it is. And so if we come over to ILS Yankee, and I ask the same question, where does it begin? He'll say, well, oh, Ladov ain't even there. Well, where is it then? Well, it's Ancona VOR. And so that is a day and night difference in this case between ILS Zulu and ILS Yankee for the ILS 22 here at Ancona in Italy. And so this one begins at Ancona. You fly north. You've got this 180 degree right-hand turn, slightly beyond 180, going direct then to Keppum. And then from Keppum, you're on to your final approach. And if we take a look here, Keppum, the floor, actually you start the whole procedure at 5,000 feet. The whole time you're descending down to 2.5. And then you maintain 2.5 until reaching the final approach fix. In this case, that's one waypoint on from Keppum, and at that point, you're on your 3 degree down all the way to the runway, 2,500 feet high. If we come over to the ILS Zulu, which begins at Ladov, if we take a look here, it's 3,000 feet, and that's it. So there's no starting at 5, descending to 3, or descending to 2,500. It's 3,500 from Ladov straight on until your final fix, and then you're down, also in this case, 3 degrees all the way down to the same piece of concrete at the end. Couple of other things to make note of then. On the ILS Zulu, if we take a look here, what happens if you go missed? And in this case, it's a left-hand turn, at least with respect to as we're coming in on the aircraft, it's going to be a left-hand turn. We go straight to this point here. Missed approach fix, Arkham. Okay, there's a bit more to it in the missed approach box here, but basically it's a left-hander to Arkham. If we take a look on the ILS Yankee, we see if we go missed on this one, it's a right-hander. In this case, more or less north, it's 356 degrees, which is parallel to the initial approach here from the VOR beacon. And so what I'm wanting you to take away from all of this in this one is that the difference in lettering, ILS Zulu, Yankee, X-ray can go all the way back, is both what happens before that final approach and what potentially happens afterwards. In other words, if you go missed. Obviously, if you land, you're on the same piece of concrete, that's it, game over. But if you go missed, in this case, Zulu or Yankee got completely different instructions. So it is very important, if ATC is the one that says you're cleared for the ILS Zulu or you're cleared for the ILS Yankee, and then for whatever reason you got to go around, or worse yet, they tell you to go around. The reason why I say that's worse is because If you make the decision to go round, usually you see it coming. But if they tell you to go round, especially if you were expecting it, what you do is day and night difference. It's either are you turning north or are you turning south based on Zulu. But let's now have a look at a difference that is not so obvious, and that's going to be the ILS X-ray. And so if we take a look at ILS X-ray, first of all, let's see what's it most similar to. Well, ILS X-ray begins at Ladov, obviously ending on the same piece of concrete. So if we take a look at Yankee, well, that's not it because that starts at Ancona. But if we go to ILS Zulu, that one also started at Ladov. So let's have a look. What's the difference between X-ray and Zulu? Both beginning at Ladov. Well, what's the floor here? 3,000 feet. X-ray, 3,000 feet. So the same there. What about the missed approach? Well, it's a left-hander from X-ray. If we go to Zulu, it's also a left-hander. So where is the difference? Well, take a look at the missed approach procedures here in the box. There's definitely a lot more written down for the X-ray. But I read through it and it basically says the same thing. It's just X-ray uses more words to say it than Zulu. So what is the difference? And if you see, the clue was in that it does use more words. If we take a look here, ILS Zulu here is only for aircraft that have the RNAV system. Here we see they require an RNAV. Zulu here has actually got two options if you've got a hold function built within the RNAV system or not, but you require RNAV. If we take a look at the X-ray one, zoom in, no RNAV requirements. And so it starts the same, the continuation is the same, and actually the hold is the same. The only difference is how that hold is achieved. If we take a look here at the missed approach fix for the Zulu, it's basically you go to the Arkham RNAV fix, the 5-letter code, and there's your hold. It's a race course pattern. If you go to the X-ray one and do a hold, yes, there's still the Arkham fix, but look how it's defined. It's defined as Arkham is based off the ANC VOR on a 173 radial, so more or less south, and it's 8 miles away. The opposite end of the hold is also based off the ANC 187 radial, but it's 12 miles away. These 2 points in space form both the start and the end of the racetrack that you're to orbit round. If you've got a more modern Airbus A320, the 737, whatever, you don't need to worry about all of that. All that you need to do is, it's already going to be programmed in based off the approach. Arkham, there's the hold, and without any further instruction, your Airbus or your plane, it's just going to go round and round and round. Whereas if you're on the X-ray, because you're in an older style aircraft that doesn't have RNAV, you've got your work cut out for you here. You've got 2 different VORs, radials. You're probably going to tune them in on left and right, and then there's your hold. Wait for your DME 12 miles, do the turn, wait until it says 8 miles, do the turn, and round you go. So there's the difference in this case between the ILS Zulu and the X-ray. In other words, if you've got a new aircraft, it's going to be ILS Zulu. If you've got an older style aircraft like the Fearless 74-2, you cannot do the ILS Zulu. It would literally be illegal in the sense that if you're trying to do things quote-unquote proper in the sim, ILS X-ray it is. If you've got a more modern aircraft and it's got an FMC sort of a failure, a navigation failure, but you still got access to the VOR, then you obviously also could not do the ILS Zulu. You'd have to default to the ILS X-ray and practice your old school navigation skills. Finally here, for the ILS, we've also got an ILS Whiskey, and if we take a look, this is actually very similar to the ILS X-ray, except if we take a look at the missed approach, ILS Zulu, we're turning southeast. For the ILS Whiskey, we're turning north. And so again, left or right. This one actually, in terms of missed approach procedures, the same as the ILS Yankee. If we take a look, it's just where the procedure begins is different. And so there we've discussed the different types of ILS there. And again, different airports are going to have different procedures, which is why just because you think, all right, well, the Zulu starts in line with the ILS and Yankee starts from a VOR. Yes, in this case, Ancona, Italy, but there may be a different airport, and that could be back to front. Maybe neither of them start from a VOR. Maybe the airport doesn't even have a VOR. You know, there's different procedures, and that's why you've got to look. That's why when somebody says, how do I know which one to use? The answer is not a case of, well, you always pick Zulu. The answer is you've got to look. So let's have a look now and see how we could figure that out. So if we were coming in here to Ancona, Italy, let's assume we've got the more modern aircraft. And so the choice really is between ILS Zulu, which begins at Ladov, or ILS Yankee, which begins at Ancona VOR. We need to pick which one of those is more suitable. So if we come over to the stars page, I'm just going to pick the top one here. This would be suitable. So if we're coming in from the northwesterly directions, this would probably be the arrival that we're on. And they bring us into this waypoint here, Kepham. So which one would be suitable for Kepham? Well, if we take a look, the VOR beacon's ways down here, so that's going to be a no-go. So let's go through here. This first one, Zulu, well, that looks like it should be in the right place, but it doesn't say Kepham. It says Ladov. Those two names, they may be very close to each other, but they're not the same. So we couldn't actually use ILS Zulu with this particular approach. What about ILS Yankee? Well, at first you may be tempted to throw this one out because, hang on, no, we already know we're coming in up here. In fact, it's even got Kepham depicted there. This one starts at Ancona. Why would we go all the way south to then come back? The answer is you probably wouldn't. But what you can do is, because Kepham is depicted here, you could actually connect into this one at Kepham. So you could connect the arrival that comes from the northwest in this example to Kepham. And so when you were joining these up on your FMC, you would ensure that the last waypoint, let me just star them in so it's easier to jump between the two. You would ensure that your last waypoint on your arrival, which is Kepham, connects to your first waypoint on your approach, which would have to be Kepham, right? If you saw Kepham and then it took you to Ancona and then it took you round here and then back to Kepham, and as you can see, they would be about 4 or 5 waypoints apart. Yes, so you'd have Ancona to this one here, then you'd have waypoint 3, and then this one again, Kepham. You would want to delete all of those waypoints in between, so it just says to Kepham and then onwards. Kepham then takes us, as you see here, into our final approach. And so that right there is how to know which one to do. Again, if you come back to the approach, ILS Zulu, Ladov just doesn't apply. This here starts at Ladov. Our arrival doesn't mention Ladov at all. If we come over here, let's try this one. This one's also to Kepham, but from the southeast. So again, it would be the same again. We would follow this, and then at Kepham, jump over to the same approach. What about this one? It says Kepham as well. This is a perfect example. So this arrival here, so the fourth one down, which basically covers anything coming from the southern end of Italy, this arrival takes us to the Ancona VOR. And so this right here, if I just star that one and we'll get rid of the existing one, come to ILS Yankee, this here is the perfect match. We don't need to edit anything. And so let's just assume, I don't know, we're coming from this waypoint here, Gerbu. So we would follow the approach here to Gerbu. It's a very simple one instruction there. There's one leg to it. That brings us to Ancona VOR. And then from Ancona VOR, it would be this one here, from Ancona VOR up north and round. That is the ILS Yankee. So if we come back to the approaches, and if we take ILS Zulu, we can see why it just wouldn't apply. Because we've got, yes, Ancona depicted, but there is no way to get from Ancona onto the final approach. ATC could, of course, vector us, but then that's what ATC is doing, not what the procedure dictates. So let's come over then, and you may say, well, is it just big airports that have this then? No. Because if we take a look over here, Heathrow, onto the approaches, here you see them on the left-hand side. So I'm just going to pick for runway 9 left, the ILS, as you see. ILS 9 left, but it doesn't say Zulu, X-ray, Yankee. And you can see, because there isn't. There's the instructions for 9 left. There's the what to do if you've got radio failures for 9 left. And there's the RNP approach for 9 left. That is it. And then you've got the same again for runway 9 right, 27 left, 27 right. So there is no X, Y, or Z in terms of ILS whatsoever for Heathrow, and you will see that for many airports. Some airports make use of them, others do not. When they do make use of them, look at it carefully, because there will be a difference between them, and sometimes that difference applies more times than others. If you're playing single player, and the only difference between ILS Zulu and Yankee is if you turn left after missed approach or right after missed approach, it's entirely up to you which one you do. If you're trying to do it properly, the differences really matter when it comes to how does it take you from where you are or where you're coming from to that final approach. Because ideally, you want a dot to dot to dot that takes you all the way from wherever you are to the final approach. Clearly, if somewhere along the lines it says expect radar vectors, then you can't really dot to dot, because that's where ATC would take over. And of course, you can just manually put a dot to dot in there if you like. But in real life, you know, you'd be on heading mode there until you intercept final approach. Last but not least, then, let's take a look over here. This one is Santos Dumont in Brazil. So I've actually created it as a flight plan. So if we come over here, if you haven't already been to this airport in the sim, you've got to go. It's an awful lot of fun. Santos Dumont, Sierra Bravo, Romeo, Juliet. And if we take a look at this airfield here, it's not Heathrow. It's this one here. Santos Dumont. All of these procedures that we're going to look at refer to this right-hand runway, 02 right. So we can see it's slightly fatter than the left one, and it's also slightly longer by about 200 feet, 4,300 versus 4,100. Opposite end is obviously 20 left, so 02 right, 20 left. All of the procedures are for the fatter of the two. That is it. And as you see, there's no ILS here, there's no VOR, there's no NDBs or whatever. Every single approach is RNP, all right? Required navigation performance. And as you can see, for runway 2 right, which is again the same one as 20 left from the opposite end, we've got RNP Lima, RNP Bravo, we've got RNP Alpha, RNP X-Ray, Whiskey Tango. We've also got RNP Foxtrot, RNP Mike, RNP Echo, Golf, Victor, Uniform, Yankee. So how do you know? And again, if you were seen as I was clicking through on these, this should be really obvious now. So again, if we come over to, let's just focus on runway 2 right. If we look at RNP Tango, we'll see this procedure begins from the south of the field, RJ222, and then we would follow the routing in here as we see. Now, if we switch over to RNP Whiskey, same runway, same approach. We see this approach actually begins ways out from the west at a waypoint called Gillett. And again, that follows in these waypoints, winds up on the same physical piece. So, very obvious. How do you know in ILS? Well, in this case, RNP. Well, if we're coming from the south, it's going to be the Tango. If we're coming from the west, it's going to be the Whiskey. If we come over, let's take a look at 20 left. Here we've got Echo. Now, what I want to say is, last point to make on this video with this many different procedures. Sometimes you'll see the letters from the back end of the alphabet working their ways up. Sometimes from the front of the alphabet, A, B, C, D, and whatever, working their way down. If you're on a bigger aircraft, so think airliner, 737, whatever, you're going to be wanting to pick a letter that starts from the back. So your Zulus, your Yankees, your X-rays, whatever, that side of the alphabet. If you're in a Cessna or something like that, you're going to look for a procedure that starts at the other end. So for example, in this case, we've got Foxtrot. Yeah, that's nearer the beginning of the alphabet. The RNP Foxtrot, the RNP Alphas, whatever. That isn't to say a Cessna can't do an RNP Whiskey approach. It can. But if you're in an airliner, you can't. So if you're an airliner, should I say, you can't do your RNP Bravos. Okay, they're specifically for smaller aircraft. Obviously, any aircraft can do the approach for a bigger aircraft, but larger aircraft can't do for small approaches. So RNP Bravo is a no-go if you're in an airliner. Think X-Ray, Whiskey, Tango, Sierra, Zulu. They're obviously all yours. And with that, I hope you found that one useful. I realize it's been quite a long video, but we've covered it there quite thoroughly. And again, in summary, the approach type, whether it's X-ray, Yankee, Zulu, or any of the other letters, the final approach, you know, the little bit from here to where you land on the concrete is going to be the same. It's what happens to get you to that final bit of approach and what happens potentially if you go missed. That's what makes it different. And that may just be dependent on what your aircraft is capable. So if it's RNP capable, you may be able to do a certain type of a procedure that somebody who isn't RNP capable can't. Also depends on how precise. It may come down to how low you can go, you know, in minimums. You know, there may be, if you've got a more advanced aircraft, you can go lower down. And if you still can't see the runway, you go missed. Whereas if you've got an older aircraft, the minimums may be much higher. And again, an easy way to say this is, rather than giving all different aircraft loads of different instructions, it's just you're on the ILS Zulu, you're on the ILS Yankee, you're on the X-ray, and that's going to be the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it useful. Until next time, take care. Ta-ra.